today we're going to talk about GenAI in the Phoenix Hive. Hands up, who's not using GenAI right now? Okay, that's good. So now you know what's the baseline we're going to talking about. Let's do a quick intro round of the guests, and if you could share what you do, which company you work for, and also how you use GenAI, or what are your touch points with GenAI?
Right. Then
Is it working?
Is it working? No. No. Yeah. Well. Yes. Data scientist and IT, right? Yeah. It's always the same. I work as a data scientist at FGS Global. We are a communication consultancy firm. I've been with the company for almost 2.5 years. And since then, we've also delved into the topic of building technology products. So we're originally not a tech company. We are classical consulting. So our work is normally super long PowerPoint slides, but we are kind of now developing products in order to help our consultants. And I work daily with GenAI. I would say, GitHub Copilot when it comes to programming, right? Developing our own product where I'm also taking part as a product manager. So I'd say I'm working daily with GenAI, and I'm quite happy that it exists.
Hi, I'm Till. I'm a partner at FGS Global. And after helping build our digital team, I had the opportunity to start building our European data and insights team, which is where we bundle our research and data science activities, but also our own product development. So we build a couple of digital and database tools, and some of them are heavily relying on GenAI. More on that later.
Yeah, hi, I'm Eric. I'm a founder of this early 2000 startup founders generation. So I worked in the field of e-commerce and online marketing. I'm an entrepreneur and investor in some of digital and e-commerce companies, and I run a business consultancy called Digital Forward. We're helping large advertisers, fast-growing advertisers, to increase their marketing efficiency. And I'm board member or Beiratsmember. I don't know what's the equivalent of a good German Mittelstandsbeirat
board member, but I might be wrong.
It's not officially about a Beirat. It's more or less in the field of private equity-backed and the entrepreneur side of companies.
Okay, thank you. So we've been actually already talking up there about what controversial things we're going to say now. Maybe starting with you guys, because you already mentioned that you're building an own product right now. Can you share where that was coming from, and what was the motivation behind that, and what was the journey along that way?
Well, first of all, Søren already said we're not a tech company, or we weren't. We're on the way of maybe partly becoming one. So it didn't come natural for us to build our own GenAI tools. And we're usually deliberate late followers. So that has been part of our strategy. We've been pretty successful with this for over 20 years. But generative AI was so on point, was so much affecting the core of what we do, which is using communications as a strategic tool to help our clients achieve their goals, that we said we need to be in this early on. We need to learn early on. We can't wait for others to make the mistakes for us. And there were two things that gave us a head start, despite the situation that we weren't experienced in the product world. That was that we already built a tech team to build another of our products, which is called Reputation IQ. No AI at all back then, but there was a nucleus of a tech team. And the other is that, well, we had people like Søren on the data team who were already familiar with the predecessors. So there have been LLMs before. They were way less powerful, but that was something that helped us. Plus, well, some daring people on our management team. First of all, our regional CEO, Brigitte, who said, well, let's do this and let's just plunge into it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Now, Eric, you up there, you mentioned that you have a more controversial view on GenAI and on the efficiency side. Can you elaborate on that?
To be clear, I didn't meant to have a controversial view.
Oh no, sorry.
In regards on you, what you guys are doing, but the general discussion about Gen AI, and I think for those who had the chance to see Christoph Bosek's little talk this morning, I think I come from a transactional marketing background, so that's one thing. That's why, from my experience, qualitative marketing, communication, branding, etc., is already served with a high focus. And Gen AI, in opposite to traditional AI, is something that you can see, you can easily see the impact of it. And that's why, in my perspective, the expectation of what Gen AI can deliver on top and on bottom line is usually over. Well, the expectation is, the tendency is that the expectations are too high. For general AI, I think the implication and the expectations are usually too low. And that's why I think, especially when it comes to Gen AI, I might have a contrarian opinion in some cases.
Thank you. Now, looking into your direction, Sören, as I understood, you're right now basically the product manager of the RAG model that you built in-house for the consultants that you have. Talking about the expectations, when you introduced that tool in the team, what was the sentiment?
Good question. So we started building this product actually in April 2023, and back then there was like this huge hype, right? Everyone had ChatGPT open, everyone was typing something in, and they were super surprised that within seconds you could get, a text, right? Let's phrase it like that. And within 6 weeks, we then built this product and rolled it out. And I think we had two types of people using it at the beginning. The first one was, okay, Gen AI is going to take over everything. It's going to threaten our jobs. It's much better than everything we can do. It's more efficient, and so on. And then on the other side, of course, you have the people who say, okay, I worked 20 years in this industry. It's about strategy. It's not going to come close. So I think you have the two extreme parts of the scale, for sure.
You want to add something to that?
Yes, I would add to that there was really a wide gap between totally inflated expectations and just ridiculing it as a toy that is only good to create haikus about Berlin Main Station or whatever the silly examples on LinkedIn were. So it took quite some time to tell people how to use it as a productivity tool at the right level. And I think one key to that was to put up some support wheels. So because the success factor of the technology is that it's just incredibly open. So that is, it's just, instead of the 747 cockpit that you had with previous models and to make them work productively, you had just this one chat line. But that can scare people off because you can do almost anything with it, and it gives you very little guidance. So we built this. So you had some places to start with for like the top 10 use cases.
So basically you build an interface around that so that it's more, let's say, user-friendly to jump into that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So that was the first stage. We then also did some research on actually identifying use cases, because I think everyone can agree, similar to DeepL, you put your email in and, it's going to sound nicer afterwards. But I personally think that's not like a use case you should use Gen AI for, right? Like it's okay, but it's only scratching the surface. So we then identified certain use cases that a lot of our consultants are actually facing each day, built like a prompt library, absolutely standard nowadays. And I think then we kind of moved to also giving access to internal databases, such as we actually work quite a lot still with media articles. So what stands in the news is very important for our clients. So we can now also query databases of media articles. For example, that a consultant is asking, okay, what's today in the news about my client? What is the sentiment by specific journalists about this? And then gets a summary. And I think with this second stage, it's more about actually, the potential of Gen AI and getting real use cases.
Thank you. Now I want to move over to you, Erik. You mentioned that you're specifically working a lot with companies that are in e-commerce and marketing related. And we also learned from Christoph Bosek that there are a few things about GenAI that need to be questioned. For example, that it cannot count all the R's in a strawberry. But talking about the use cases for you, what were the use cases that you were most, let's say, surprised about? For example, we had Vanessa from Lucom here, the CEO, and she mentioned that she's actually using GenAI to produce new products or generate new products.
Yeah, right. I think that's a good example that GenAI isn't limited to stuff we already had before, like pictures, small video clips, etc., or even translations. I think if you have the chance to use GenAI across functions, like in CRM, in product, and in marketing targeting, for instance, I think that's where real value can be created for the company, and not only for the vendors of these companies. But coming back to the expectations, I think a typical issue of friction, I can give some flavor to that question, is the expectation management of different stakeholders. And coming from the top of an organization to the real functions where actually the productivity part of GenAI is happening, in 95% of all the cases, the top of an organization is combining the expectation of GenAI directly related to cost reductions. And I think hearing what you guys are saying, it's not really about the cost, it's about the quality of the product and the service you're supplying. And basically that is the biggest misunderstanding, maybe, that GenAI isn't the right tool to cut your costs. Of course it's an efficiency issue, but you shouldn't compare relative costs to absolute costs. Usually what is happening is that the overall cost of, for instance, of a function like creating images or doing translations or whatever the task is, that the relative costs are diminishing, the cost per task. But the absolute costs are in many cases rather doubling because your output is so much higher. But that is, again, it's the question where the value actually is created and what kind of expectations are behind that.
I'd say I think there are some business models where there's actually a lot of cost savings to gain from generative AI. That's if you're in the business of creating large volumes of average quality content. And I know some companies in our sectors who very actively explore how they could reduce staff and cut costs based on this, and it may make sense for them. But I think you're making an excellent point, and that was one that we thought about as well. So we want to be in a race to the top and not in a race to the bottom. So we track the time that our consultants save by asking them. So there's no way of, because we are not doing a cookie cutter approach. We cannot just measure throughput time, but we need to ask people just what their subjective experience is. Yes, they think they save time, but the time saved would never justify the investment that we do in development and also the investment in training, etc. But what justifies the investment is how we get better at certain things. So one of my favorite prompts of the past almost 2 years was, give me 100 scenarios ranging from realistic to wildly off of what could happen in the next 10 years that alters EU energy policy. And it did exactly that. So, and like maybe 10, 20 were totally garbage. 30 were stating the obvious. Some were because the model at the time didn't know about Ukraine. Some were saddeningly predictive, and some were weird, but got us thinking. And there were some in it that the experts wouldn't see when we tried to make up our mind about it, because, well, experts are sometimes a bit stuck in their ways, right? So it helps you to think outside of the box, and that was a cool moment, because it was not about saving time at all. We could have done a usual brainstorming. That was not the point, but the point was to get this nudge and to get this to tap into this vast amount of knowledge that you can use to be creative.
I think it's an excellent example, because if you see, for instance, something like a pattern of where GenAI can create value and how many cases are actually applicable for that. So it's a little bit like a pyramid. So you have many cases like average content articles or average translations or whatever, where you have a multitude of tasks and of course relatively high cost savings. The point is, if you don't connect any value or any goals to that, what is happening is from a competitive perspective. If you are just using the average high volume task, you are playing on an even level playing field. So this tool is available for everyone within your organization, but also within your competitive landscape. Meaning, like, you're only playing defense if you're sticking to these kinds of cost savings. What you just mentioned, if you're adding intelligence, well, no matter whether it's artificial supported or human intelligence, then you are going into rather a niche where you're creating real value, and you're going out of your even level playing field, because that is a competitive advantage you can sustain. But these cases aren't high volume cases, according to my experience. You're going to a niche which is defendable, and that is again, from my experience, a big misunderstanding that you shouldn't mix up or averaging all the cases between low value, high volume cases compared to the high value, low volume cases, because the later are defendable, the others are just playing defense in order to not get totally disconnected from competition.
Yeah, the good thing is, sorry, we're going to move over to you. The good thing is we're actually here in the Phoenix Hive, and as a reminder, so Phoenix Hive is about profitability, and what we usually, or what comes to our mind is like cutting costs, laying off people and so on, but we truly believe that profitability also means top line. So basically, how can GenAI also help to generate revenue? Looking again into your direction, I feel like you want to say something to that.
Yes, I want. I think one factor that we didn't mention yet is actually also enabling employees to do tasks they wouldn't do before, because they thought, okay, this is not my field, I can't do this. Very good example was actually an intern that we had that was coming to me and said, hey, I did a regression analysis. And I was like, okay, cool. How did you do that? Right? Because I know that she back in the times didn't have like a background, I thought, but she was saying, okay, I was just using the tool. The tool explained me to do this and that. Then I did this in Google Colab, and here's the result. Can you fact check that? And I was looking over it, and I was like, yeah, pretty much like I would do it. So I think it's also a great tool for enablement. And if you think that forward, if companies enable their employees to also go into other directions, that's also definitely something that pays off when it comes to profitability at the end.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people often forget, because when you optimize processes, it's not only about making sure that processes are actually much more efficient and quicker, but when you actually lift off that time that is basically released, it's insane for the people, because sometimes they don't even know what they're going to do with the additional time. And the worst thing that you should be doing with that additional time is to have idle time, basically, right? You should rather think about like how you can generate more revenue for the company, or what other things that you should be investigating. Now, I want to dive deeper into the implementation side of things, because I think that's something that is usually very difficult. You already mentioned that you've been working on the user interface to make it more easy, but what other challenges did you guys see when implementing that? And also, I think Erik also has some experience in that.
Yes, so from the technical side, just want to mention one story because I think it's really funny. So I'm also part of the development team, so to say, and we were experimenting with retrieving information from a database, right? That's like a classical use case you also see all over LinkedIn, and we then did a proof of concept, and we're sitting in the room and we were like, oh, that's so cool, right? Like it's retrieving information, it's summarizing that. enormous profit, right? Like this is super. And then again, we were like also, of course, asking our colleagues about it. And then there was this one moment where one colleague said, well, I actually don't know this information. And I was like, yeah, I mean, it's in the database, right? Thousands of, information. And at the end, it turned out that there was a whole hallucinating behavior of the model making up this information. And we from the development team didn't know that. So, and we were convinced it was right because it was stating even the source tag correctly. So it was very convincing. And I think this reminds me, although you're working with models for a long time, stay critical, because these models can be very convincing, and at the end we don't want anyone to be frustrated or losing trust in an application because there is wrong information being cited.
I'd like to bring up two more aspects that are like on a layer outside of the immediate development, and like, one has to do with what we then ventured into after we basically based on the then agreed upon LLM stack that I think Andreessen Horowitz posted on their blog, which was very helpful, and it was mainly relying like on open source software that we like plugged together and put a nice UI on. When we ventured a bit deeper and tried to open up like sources of knowledge within the company, I must admit we realized that some of them are not ready to be searched and summarized and transformed by an AI. So you still need to do the hard work. So the knowledge somehow needs to get in there. So there's a lot of legwork involved if you didn't do your knowledge management homework before. That sounds pretty boring, but if you want this competitive advantage that is not just defense, then this is another frontier that you really need to get your ducks in a row when it comes to where do we store our knowledge, how do we make it accessible, how do we, in our case, because we work with a lot of confidential material, how do we sanitize that so that we can actually use it? So that is one point. The other point is that it's just useful and just profitable if people use it to their advantage. I think the game changer for us was that we involved the consultants from the start, beginning with Søren, who also works as a consultant, but also with a lot of people who worked in the development of the use cases and prompts from the start, and that we continuously train people and continuously really work with the users and not just shove this onto them.
Your question was practical experience from the implementation phase. Yeah. Just so that I'm not answering the wrong question. I think the most critical experience is the phase 0 of an implementation phase, and that's actually, it doesn't, from my experience, it doesn't matter whether it's an AI implementation or just a regular tech automation implementation. So first thing is actually the reason why. And the best proxy whether your project is going to fail or has some kind of a chance to be successful is who's actually driving the project. Is it rather triggered from an external, let's say, vendor initiative, or is that from a maybe top-level stakeholder part, or is it from a functional part or maybe cross-functional initiatives of the company? The last situation is obviously the most likely to be some kind of a success. The first is, according to my experience, almost 100% fail rate, especially when it needs to be cost and time efficient. So the best implementation phases were started at the very beginning, coming from a problem, and didn't continue with something like a tool selection. Rather where you don't have any scarcity in tools today. So you have an overflow of possibilities of choosing the right tool, and you don't have any, even the commitment is, and that's different to regular tech implementation. You can choose the size of your project quite widely, and also to smaller bits. And then it keeps on going, especially if you don't need a buy-in from not really involved stakeholders like finance, procurement, or whatever. Yeah, and then it really depends on the POC and how the willingness of an organization to have iterations, even if the first attempt might be failing.
Thank you. That's a very good example also because it's not GenAI, but FinAuto, you might know that company. They're basically completely built on top of automations. So, automations that are low code, basically, even no code, I think, to some extent. And that was really purely being driven through the organization, basically. I think they also have the advantage that they're just all probably digital native, but that's not the case for lots of other companies, right? So how should we deal with that for those companies where, for example, as you said, the C-level decides we need to use GenAI. Probably they themselves don't use GenAI a lot. I don't know, but how do we go about that? Because I think that actually happens a lot.
Do you mean how we can prevent that?
Yeah, maybe that.
Actually, no. I think it's also a level of confidence. This especially GenAI, because the entry barrier is quite low compared to other automation or analytical parts of it. So the entry barrier for any kind of AI initiative in GenAI is within the lowest, because also the lock-in of your organization to step away, it is quite feasible. I think the most convincing path also to pursue stakeholders is to have a clear idea, not only a vision, but something you can actually quantitatively prove in time and cost or whatever the kind of value might be. And value shouldn't be mixed up with cost. And then taking it from there. And the obstacles you're usually facing, even on digital first companies, how you put it, I know digital first companies, maybe something like of the last 5 years, who also have the not invented here problem. If you are if you have a company based on a strong code heritage, that, according to my experience, even those younger companies aren't very likely to have this perceived loss of control in code creation, in process, and in creative output. It's rather this very last generation where they use that a prompt can be a very good tool to make the larger parts of your organization AI savvy and getting hungry for more.
Yeah, and I think it's also depending not only on the generations but also the work areas that we're working or the teams. For example, my experience has been that's why I was so surprised when you said that actually. But data and tech teams are still very hesitant. I wouldn't say that they don't want to work with GenAI, but they would always obviously say that their own code is the best.
They are lying. I mean, I think everyone is using GitHub Copilot, and like in a classical sense, that's GenAI. So if you could name me one programmer at Project A who's not using GitHub Copilot, I'd be surprised.
Okay.
Just to add one thing, it's also a question of the incentives. Like if you, and that it could open up a broader field, like how dependent are you from external parties in your services? Like in traditional creative creation agencies, especially in larger companies with some kind of legacy, are totally dependent or feel dependent from creative agencies. And the reason why that is not only because they really think that they are dependent, is because that the incentives of the organizations are done that also taking the risk of maybe a creation which doesn't succeed is externalized. So if you have a culture where failure is okay, and if it's within a process, your incentive to improve your processes is much higher. But in many companies, the incentive to actually use GenAI or even traditional data is not there, especially not where the responsibility lies. And that, if you are responsible or partly responsible for a company, that would be the first thing I would look at and maybe change, that the incentive and the responsibility structure are done in a way that tools like GenAI are rather embraced instead of feared?
With us, there are no incentives at all for the use of Gen AI, other than that, it empowers people to do a better job. So, so in our organization, we're a partner-led firm globally. So I can secure a budget to build such a tool or to buy a tool, but I cannot force anyone to use it, especially not the partners. So the only thing that I can do is that I can, like, I don't know, some of you might have been here at the previous session and heard of the tale of the mice. So I could find some mice, find some people who are susceptible to change, who like change and like to try things. And if our global CEO posts something on Teams and says, hey, I just tried out this incredible prompt, that's worth like 1,000 incentives to me, because that really gets people thinking and going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really has to come with the leadership as well. Now I want to talk about the future. So on the one hand side, what do you think, like in which direction GenAI is going to develop? Also, I know it's very difficult also because the progress seems slower. And second question is for FGS. What's going to be the future of Fergus, the tool that you've built?
I'm gonna answer the first part. Till is gonna take on the second one. So I would say, I mean, future again, everything that I'm saying now is speculation, right? I would say models become more a commodity, right? I might be the case that in 2 or 3 years, no one is talking about OpenAI anymore. And then it's gonna be interesting whether it's gonna be a monopoly or, you know, some other companies building these models. I would say for FT's global or our industry, actually where we have the models at the moment, it's enough. Like we could stop the development here and could develop for 5 or 6 years to make processes much more efficient. I'd say with the current models, we have all of the power to do so much work. So I think it's on the dev team, especially to roll out more and try more and actually ship and ship.
So that's why, looking at the architecture, we try to remain ready to make a change whenever it makes sense. So we might rely on totally different LLMs in the future, while when it comes to the product vision and the features that we're currently developing, we're making the next change now. So at the start, it was about giving people access to LLM, safe access that they could use with our client data at all. The second thing was to open up internal knowledge to these people, but it's still mostly an individual thing. So everybody logs into their tool and they would use it on their own, and they would share, like there's 20-page PDFs now or Word documents that outline how you use that on an IPO situation, and that is great because it shows how much people value that. But we want to bring that into the tool. So the next step would be to turn it into a kind of platform or marketplace where teams could really share knowledge and could work on their own prompts and with their own RAG context data collaboratively. So I think that is going to be like our way forward to make sure that we're not playing defense but offense.
I think from an advertiser's perspective or a company perspective, I think, of course, we're gonna see managed services or service partners like you who are actually using that tool very efficiently and who are actually very specialized in a certain task. But on a broader landscape in GenAI, I think we're going to see more larger tool platforms with AI enhanced features. Like, of course, you know the Photoshop example, but also in broader marketing, we've seen TikTok being one of the first augmented reality use cases, something like even 10 years ago. That wasn't necessarily GenAI, but some kind of a pretty early feature. In Meta and Google already, we are fully in an AI enhanced world, but maybe the bitter part of that is that these margin pools aren't distributed to the companies. They usually stick with the platform, and the rest again is rather a competition-based, even level playing field. So, but also in CRM, the likelihood that that something like larger platforms in lead gen or in regular CRM, that they are able, because of the data quality of their expertise and also on the level of integrations they have, that actually these platforms are using GenAI and providing this GenAI out of the box to advertisers and companies is, according to my observation, the most likeliest case.
Yeah, thank you. I'm also very curious to see how video outputs will be in the future. I mean, we've seen a few excerpts already, and also what it will do to the film industry. Okay, I'm gonna open now the round for questions. If there, okay.
Thanks for the panel. I wanted to ask a very practical question about sanitizing data. You said that you work with a lot of sensitive data and you sanitize it before using your RAG application. How do you do it? Because if you sanitize it with an LLM, what's the point? So, or use a local one. Yeah, would be curious to hear how you did.
So when I'm talking about sanitizing data, it is what consultancies would do if they save some best practices for later teams to use, because it's not only about preventing prying eyes from the outside from looking at it, but usually in a business like this, you have a lot of Chinese walls within the firm as well, because you're working with confidential data that is really supposed to only go to the people who absolutely need it. So sanitizing this data means manual work. So somebody's got to select the files that are meant to be shared and that are worth the individual effort to put them somewhere. So somebody else can later on work with whatever facts or process knowledge or whatever else is in there.
Yes, maybe a question to Sören, because you talked about hallucinating, and we are also facing with a lot of clients like the hallucinating part and how can it be transparent with all the sources and so on. What do you think about a new model from ChatGPT with the reasoning, the O1?
Again, I mean, it's not it's been out for 2-3 weeks, right? Interesting approach, right? Because it's shifting the paradigm a little bit. Also, it's putting OpenAI a little bit more on the map. Previously, it was definitely Google that was, coming closer. I would say when it comes to RAG applications, you can make sure that you can avoid a lot of hallucinating stuff. And on the other side, I would also argue that these models will stay non-deterministic. So you will always have cases where the information is off, no matter how good the input information is, for example. And then I would say it's definitely crucial to kind of measure this variance, if this is possible in your use case, to also give users, so to say, an information that, okay, within 1.5% of your answers, you might get an answer that is probably not correct. And of course, there are much more technologies not naming GenAI that you could use. So I think there is a revival of just rule-based approaches for a lot of use cases that you can also use. So again, you don't have to solve everything with GenAI. That has been before with AI, machine learning, and so on. Sometimes simpler is much better.
Okay, then we're at the end of the time. Thank you so much for joining the panel and sharing your insights, and I hope you had fun.
Thanks for having us.